for an airport, it has a finite, I would say, real estate. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, you have a finite number of runways that are operational.
Correct.
And considering the amount of traffic that these kind of airports get, sometimes, let's say, if there were to be, God forbid, there were to be an emergency and you guys have to quickly make sure that the plane can land and everything. But then while that plane is occupying the space on the runway, there are like three other planes waiting to be landed, right?
Mm.
So all in all, how does this work out? I've been very fascinated to know about that. That how do you guys make sure that the traffic gets rerouted, and the emergency is always prioritized?
So that's a very good question, and it's one thing that you don't realize before joining an airport, but there are people whose job it is to specialize in contingency planning. Contingency planning is a fancy way of saying
Mm-hmm.
what do we do when things don't go to plan, and what plan do we have
Mm-hmm.
that we can activate as soon as something goes wrong and we need to fix it. So for example, if there ever was an emergency, we press like a metaphorical
Mm-hmm.
button, and there are people who could be at home, they're on
Mm-hmm.
their day off, within 90 minutes they have to be at the
Mm-hmm.
airport straight away. So if anything happens,
Oh,
we have
okay.
a group of
Okay.
people who are on standby
Yeah.
constantly to deal with any emergencies. So instantly you have the resource available,
Uh-huh.
and they have the headspace that their only job at the airport today is to try and get this issue solved. That's step one. When they step into the
Mm-hmm.
situation, there was somebody else who, for the past
Mm-hmm.
couple of years, and my friend is doing this currently, his job is to think of the worst case
Okay.
scenario of something that might happen and write a plan of what we can do if
Mm-hmm.
that does happen. And he won't write that plan by himself. He'll go to the
Mm-hmm.
subject matter expert on the
Okay.
ground, and he will sit down with a meeting with him one to
Mm-hmm.
one, and they will get down on paper exactly what we are going to do if something was not to go wrong. And that is in case of an emergency, if there's an aircraft that crashes, or if one day the lights, all
Mm-hmm.
the electrical supply switches off one day and we don't have any more electricity, or
Mm-hmm.
if maybe one of the tunnels was to
Yeah.
collapse, or if there was a road traffic
Uh-huh.
accident, anything.
Mm-hmm.
This colleague in particular, he's written on his desk, on his laptop, he's written, if it's real and it could happen, plan
Yeah.
for it. He's
Yeah.
got that on his desk. Like,
Okay.
if it's not, as long as it's not imaginary and it might
Interesting.
happen,
Yeah.
let's have a plan
Yeah.
in place to make sure that when that does
Yeah.
happen, we can
Yeah.
overcome it. So even before the emergencies actually
Right.
happened, you'll see how much has happened behind the scenes
Mm-hmm.
that are preparing just in
Yeah.
case something was to happen. Now, your question was more specifically about where do we reroute the airports. Now, luckily, we have two runways. So
Mm-hmm.
if there was ever to be an
Mm-hmm.
issue with one of the runways, we always have another runway that we could utilize. So if there was an emergency aircraft and we wanted to land it
Mm-hmm.
on one airplane, we wanted to land it on, let's say, the northern
Mm-hmm.
runway, we
Mm-hmm.
can always just continue the rest of the operation, although at a slower pace, on the southern runway. So we could go
Yeah.
to single runway operations. That was in worst case scenario, something's happened on that northern runway. One thing you
Uh-huh.
need to realize about Heathrow Airport is that
Right.
even if something quite catastrophic may happen, there are our
Mm-hmm.
goal, as long as safety is controlled, is to try and keep the operation
Mm-hmm.
moving.